The Hello Neighbour 2 beta has been released, and at first I was a little surprised that the developers Dynamic Pixels had even been given the opportunity to make a sequel after seeing those disastrous review scores that were dished out for the full version of the original Hello Neighbour. Then after doing a little digging, I saw that the Hello Neighbour franchise was actually making some serious cheddar. The success of Hello Neighbour is for some the failure of Hello Neighbour, and by that I mean it kind of depends how old you are. Hello Neighbour was first released into alpha, and monster YouTube channels like Markiplier, TDM, FGTeev were all blowing this game up beyond the stratosphere, racking up hundreds of millions of views between them. Naturally, this was a Hello Neighbours marketing wet dream coming to life. Those of you who don't know, Hello Neighbour was a stealth horror game where you played as a child attempting to sneak into the neighbour's house, solving puzzles and trying to figure out what's hiding in the basement. In the first alpha version, the game had the most intense AI, where if the neighbour caught a glimpse of you, he'd hunt you down via the quickest route possible, and if he caught you, he'd very politely place you on the perimeter of his property so you could try again, which brings into question who actually is the dickhead neighbour in this story. He'd even remember your last point of entry and go full on Macaulay Culkin mode and set traps around the house. This all made the neighbour feel harsh but fair, and most importantly, tense. Then they released Alpha 2 with a new clunkier player model and somehow worsening the platforming. Then came Alpha 3 where they added a much bigger house to explore, but to counter this they nerfed the neighbour, who would now continuously glitch in place or be unable to reach the player in certain areas due to poor trap placements, level design, and his AI not being up to scratch for this bigger environment. Dynamic Pixels even doubled down on the platforming aspects of the game, which to be honest, they were the worst aspects of the game. Then came Alpha 4 where the neighbour was nerfed into a mentally unwell person who by this point was just walking around utterly lost. Then the betas came again, a worsened experience, more bugs and even more infuriating platforming, and finally the full release, which was met with the scores you'd expect. Somehow though, the brand grew into a franchise that surpassed 30 million players worldwide, with the demographic being predominantly 8 to 16-year-olds. This in my opinion was in no way the intention, considering how intense the Alpha 1 was and how dark the lore behind the neighbour actually is. To me, this was a happy little accident, but here we are today with a Hello Neighbour book series making over $16 million in revenue, a board game version, multiple spin-off versions of the game, unbelievably an animated TV series based on the game, and finally a sequel, Hello Neighbour 2. The biggest changes are we play as a journalist, which is an interesting choice considering the success of the first game was based on a younger audience, and the other biggest change, and probably a wiser choice in my opinion, was to have this journalist explore a town rather than one single house. That massive house in the first game was the cause to so many problems relating to the AI, where it struggled to keep up through so many twisting and turning corridors. Now we can move from house to house, each with their own neighbour or character relating to that house who doesn't want you snooping around. These smaller houses definitely improved the feel of breaking and entering, and there's still a good amount of sneaky ways to break in and more manipulating of the environment to create distractions. This still doesn't feel as intense as Alpha 1 did though, which for me engaged the adult brain far more. The puzzles are still as wild and convoluted as they were in Neighbour 1, but I actually enjoy that aspect of experimentation. It rarely, if ever, makes sense, like swapping out a blueprint to persuade a craftsman to use a fish head instead of a wooden mallard, just so you can steal the head and add it to the neighbour's stuffed animal collection, which unlocks a case containing a pulley stick to open up the attic door. That's completely fucking bonkers, but I can't pretend I didn't enjoy experimenting to find this out and feel some satisfaction when it all came together. The beta is marked with a typical statement of missing game features and bugs that are to be expected. There were plenty of them too: clipping, texture popping, zero day and night transitioning, falling through the map, but what bothered me most was the statement said, expect to be reunited with box stacking. This was one of the most infuriating parts of the first game. Now I can't speak on how much this might have been improved on, but it drastically needed improving from the first game, and to not even have it included in the beta was alarming. The other biggest feature was window breaking, and again this will be included in the full version of the game. The game looks a million times better than the original though. As you can see, the visuals are much crisper and still maintaining that Tim Burton-esque art style that I still think appeals to gamers of all ages. It'll be interesting to see if Hello Neighbour 2 will go on to achieve that same final financial success as the first game, and although the concept of having a town to explore is far more appealing than a single house, I think gaming accessibility for youngsters has changed dramatically since 2016, and most of those kids who played it back then are no longer kids. I hope the franchise continues to grow because I'm a 34-year-old gamer, so who am I to question a franchise that's grown to be so popular amongst a younger generation? The biggest question I had was whether this was the intention to begin with on Hello Neighbour 1, and now that the publisher's tiny build are sending codes out to piss-arse tin pot channels like this one with not even 2,000 subscribers, and looking at the numbers so far, there's nowhere near the same amount of free YouTube publicity as there was when Markiplier and others were playing the original game. The full version is planned to be released December the 6th this year, so they've got a ton of time to tweak it beyond recognition of this beta version, but I think there's a clear vision already in place, so I think the focus should be on refinement, polishing the game and bug fixing. Let us know what you guys think. If you've enjoyed the video, go and check out some of our other content, consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.